4 AC, King Aegon was marching home from Dorne, having seemingly successfully subjugated it as part of his realm. It very much did appear that his conquest was now well and truly complete. But he had hardly reached King's Landing before Dorne erupted into bloody chaos. Dornish spearmen appeared from nowhere, like desert flowers after a spring rain. The castles of Skyreach, Ironwood, the Tor and Ghost Hill were all recaptured by the Dornish within 2 weeks. Their Targaryen garrison put to the sword. Aegon's Castellans and stewards were only allowed to die after long torment as a form of a message to the Conqueror. It was said that the Dornish lords had wagers over how long they could keep their captives alive the longest whilst dismembering them. However, more modern maesters believe this may just be a case of anti-Dornish propaganda spread by the Westerosi lords to incite and maintain the divide between Dorne, the Dornish and the rest of Westeros. Lord Rosby, whom Aegon had named his Castellan of Sunspear and Warden of the Sands, had a kinder end than most, in a fashion at least. After the Dornish swarmed into Sunspear from the Shadow City to retake the castle, he was bound hand and foot, dragged to the top of the Spear Tower and thrown from a window by none other than the aged, half-blind Princess Mira Martell herself. Very quickly, Lord Harlen Tyrell found himself the only Targaryen loyalist left south of the Red Mountains, but he did still command a sizable host. He was occupying Hellholt, an old and strong castle on the Brimstone River, a place that was well suited to deal with any kind of revolt. But there were issues. The river water was sulphurous and toxic, and the fish taken from it had made many of Lord Tyrell's men sick. The nearby house Cargyle of Sandstone had never submitted, and their spearmen cut down Tyrell's foraging parties and patrols whenever they strayed too far west. The Vaiths of Vaith did the same to the east. When word of the recapture of Sunspear reached Hellholt, Lord Tyrell gathered his remaining strength and set off across the sands at once. He announced his intention was to recapture Vaith, march east along the river and take Sunspear and the Shadow City and punish Lord Rosby's murderers. But somewhere east of Hellholt, amidst the red sands, Tyrell and his entire army disappeared. No man of them was ever seen again. Not even the Dornish appeared to know of his fate. From what little we know about the enigma of Aegon Targaryen as a person, it is that he was not a man to accept defeat. The war in Dorne would drag on for another 7 years, though after 6 AC the fight degenerated into an endless bloody series of atrocities, raids and retaliations, broken up by long periods of inactivity, a dozen short truces and numerous murders and assassinations. In 7 AC, Orys Baratheon, Aegon's half-brother and hand of the king, as well as the other lords who had been captured in the Boneway during the initial invasion of Dorne, were ransomed back to King's Landing for their weight in gold. But like most deals with the Dornish, there was a sting in the tail. On their return, it was found that the widow lover, Will of Will, had lopped each man's sword hand off, so they might never again take up sword against Dorne. In retaliation, Aegon himself descended on the mountain fortress of the Wills with Balerion, and reduced half a dozen of their keeps and watchtowers to heaps of molten stone. The Wills took refuge in caves and tunnels beneath the mountains, and the widow lover lived another 20 long years. In 8 AC, a very dry year even in Dorne, Dornish raiders crossed the Sea of Dorne on ships provided by a pirate king of the Stepstones, attacking half a dozen towns and villages along the shores of Cape Wrath, and setting fires that spread through half of the Rainwood. Fire for fire, Princess Mira is reported to have said. This was not something the Targaryens would allow to go unanswered. Later that same year, Visenya Targaryen appeared in the skies of Dorne, and Vhagar's fires were loosed upon Sunspear and Lemonwood. In 9 AC, she returned again, this time with Aegon himself, flying beside her, and Sandstone, Vaith and Hellholt burned. In this war of retaliation after retaliation, the Dornish answer came the following year, when Lord Fowler led an army through the Prince's Pass and into the Reach, moving so swiftly that he was able to burn a dozen villages and capture the great castle Nightsong, the seat of House Targaryen, before the Marcher Lords realised the Dornish had even crossed into their lands. When word of the attack reached Oldtown, Lord Hightower sent his son, Sir Adam Hightower, with a strong force to retake the castle, but the Dornish had anticipated just that. A second Dornish army under Sir Joffrey Dane came down from Starfall and attacked Oldtown. Its walls proved far too strong for the Dornish to overcome, but the Danes burnt every field, farm and village for 20 leagues, and slew Lord Hightower's youngest son, Garman, when the young boy led a sortie against them. Sir Adam Hightower reached Nightsong, only to find Lord Fowler had put the castle to the torch, and its garrison to the sword. Lord Carron and his wife and children had been carried back to Dorne as captives. Rather than pursue, Sir Adam returned at once to Oldtown to relieve the city, but Sir Joffrey and his army had melted back into the mountains as well. Lord Manfred Hightower died soon after, and Sir Adam succeeded his father as Lord of the High Tower as Oldtown cried out and demanded vengeance. King Aegon flew Balerion to Highgarden to take counsel with his warden of the south, but Theod Tyrell, the new young lord, was most reluctant to be part of another invasion of the Red Sands of Dorne after the fate that had befallen his father. Rather than another all-out invasion of Dorne, Aegon settled for what House Targaryen knew best: fire and blood. He once again unleashed his dragons against the Dornish. Aegon himself fell upon Skyreach, vowing to make the Fowler seat a second Harrenhal. Visenya and Vhagar brought fire and blood to Starfall, revenge for the Hightowers in Oldtown, and Rhaenys and Meraxes returned once more to Hellholt, where for the first time since Aegon landed in Westeros 11 years ago, a painful tragedy struck, a tragedy at the very heart of House Targaryen. The Targaryen dragons were bred and trained for battle, and had flown through storms of spears and arrows on many occasions, and suffered little to no harm. The scales of fully grown dragons like the Conquerors were harder than steel, and even those arrows that did strike a dragon seldom did enough damage to even penetrate the scales. Most of the time, the dragons never even noticed. But even so, dragons were not unkillable if you have the right tools, a brave man, and luck. As Meraxes banked high above Hellholt, a lone defender atop the castle's highest tower fired a scorpion. It was an unlikely shot given the speed and distance of Meraxes, a shot most certainly impossible, but luck was very much in his favour that day. The yard-long iron bolt caught the Queen's dragon in the right eye. Meraxes did not die at once, became crashing down to earth, destroying the Tower of Hellholt and a large section of the curtain wall. Whether Rhaenys Targaryen outlived her dragon remains a matter of much debate. Some say she lost her seat and fell to her death. Others that she was crushed beneath Meraxes in the castle yard. A few accounts claim the Queen survived her dragon's fall, only to die a slow death by torment in the dungeons of the Ullars. The true circumstances of her demise will likely never be known, but on the balance of probability, most maesters seem to agree she most likely died on impact with Meraxes. Regardless, Rhaenys Targaryen, sister and wife to King Aegon, perished at Hellholt in the 10th year after the conquest, leaving behind a hole in the hearts of her siblings, and her and Aegon's young son, Prince Aenys. The next 2 years were known as the Dragon's Wroth. Every castle in Dorne was burnt thrice over, as Balerion and Vhagar returned again and again. The sands around Hellholt were fused into glass in places, with much of it even remaining today. The Dornish lords were forced into hiding, but even that did not save them this time. Lord Fowler, Faith, Toland, and 4 successive lords of Hellholt were murdered, one after the other, as the Iron Throne had offered a lord's ransom in gold for the heads of any Dornish lord. Only 2 of the killers lived to collect these rewards, however, as the Dornishmen took their reprisals, repaying blood with blood. Lord Coddington of Griffin's Roost was killed whilst hunting. Lord Mertens of Mistwood poisoned, with his whole household by a cask of Dornish wine. Lord Fell smothered in a brothel in King's Landing. Nor were the Targaryens themselves exempt. The king was attacked thrice, and would have fallen on 2 of those occasions, but for his guards. Queen Visenya was set upon one night in King's Landing. 2 of her escorts were slain before Visenya cut down the last attacker with her Valyrian steel sword Dark Sister. The most infamous act of this bloody age occurred in 12 AC, when Will of Will, the widow lover, arrived uninvited at the wedding of Sir John Catherine, heir to Fawntown, to Alice Oakhart, the daughter of the Lord of Old Oak. admitted through the postern gate by a treacherous servant. The attackers slew Lord Oakhart and most of the wedding guests, then made the bride look on as they gelded her husband. Afterwards they took turns assaulting Lady Alice and her handmaids, then carried them off and sold them to Meerish slavers, with them likely ending up in the pleasure gardens of Lys.